Well, here we are to week 6. You have made it halfway through. Hooray! I'm so glad that I've got you on my team. We're going to make a lot of changes in the world. So, today I want to talk to you about the question and answer period, which comes up when a person has been singing a few songs in the memory choir. And as I said in the last part that you read, certain songs are going to trigger certain responses. Most of the time, this is the most wonderful feeling when somebody actually speaks aloud their treasured memory. They are remembering as they're speaking, it's coming back to them. You can kind of picture, have you ever told a dream to somebody? And as you're talking about the dream, you begin to remember parts of the dream. It's like that. So a person with dementia may, for instance, let's say that we were singing It Had to Be You. And at the end of It Had to Be You, I might say something like, that's a great first dance at a wedding. It really is. It's a great first dance. And people will begin to say, yes, yes. And when I see their eyes light up like that, I know that they've got a story in mind. Something came to them. And at that point, I can begin to milk it just a little bit in subtle ways. Then I might say, I wonder if anybody remembers dancing on their first date to that song or going to a big band. And somebody might say, big band. I saw a big band play that. And then that's it. Boom, I'm in. So then I can begin to go through who, what, when, where. I can begin to mine that memory. So somebody says, I saw a big band play that. Then I might say, oh, wow, was that? It must have been in a big city like New York. And they might go, no. LA, Los Angeles? And they go, yes, it was Los Angeles. And then and so as I go through the questions, more will begin to come back to them. And they'll say, it was that famous big band leader. And then I'll say, oh, maybe Count Basie? Or was it Duke Ellington? And usually I can they lock in. Maybe it wasn't Duke Ellington, but at some point in their life, they saw Duke Ellington. So Duke Ellington is alive in their brain. Somewhere in their brain, Duke Ellington is swimming around in there. Does that make sense? So then at that point, I might say, gee, I wonder if that was before the war or after the war. And they might say, it was before the war. And usually what they mean is they're either saying before the Korean War or before World War II. Because some of these people are extremely elderly. They're really old. And some of them might have been around even in like 1940, because some of them are octogenarians or nontaugenarians, or even some of them might be 100. And there's always one or two. So you don't really know which war they're recalling, but they're ready to give you some wartime memories. And that can really begin to open up a big mine of memories. Once you get on the category of war, then they want to talk about famous war songs. And then they're going to go through the list, right? My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean. That was one of those wartime songs that was really popular that everybody knows. So, Bye Bye Blackbird. Some of those songs, the swing songs from the 40s, are very big still. It Had to Be You is one that almost everybody knows. It Had to Be You. It was a very popular song. So they may recall a big band. They might recall their first dance. Some people will think they'll start recalling high school. And then, oh boy, it could be fun. A lot of times when people recall past memories, they actually are talking about times when they got away with stuff. There was one that a person that I saw, and she said, "My brother and I used to get away with things," and then she didn't even talk normally, but suddenly she wanted to talk about how she and her brother got away with things. And so I said, "Did you sneak out of the house?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Who drove the car? Did you drive the car?" She said, "My brother. He drove us across town to a party." And it's funny because people love to talk about things they got away with, and they all have a good laugh about it and elbow each other. And it's just funny, the things that we remember when we're under the umbrella of dementia. I don't want to get too deep into other people's personal memories, but when you go into travel, travel is another great subject. So there's one care unit that I work in. I have a memory choir. And every time we sing Slow Boat to China, one of the ladies holds up her hand. She's got a story to tell. Because after we sing Slow Boat to China, I'll say, "Now there's a place I would love to visit. Has anybody here ever visited China?" And boom, her hand goes up and she's ready to tell you the story about Shanghai. So she just, she's a lovely, lovely soul. And she always tells me the whole story. I always have to kind of get her to condense it a little bit. But apparently there was a wedding that she went to, and it was her daughter-in-law that is Chinese, and so she had quite the experience in China. So now that she's 90 and extremely suffers from extreme dementia, she still loves to share stories of China. And these are wonderful for the brain because the moment you begin to share a story, as I've said, stimulation happens. When you speak a memory aloud, it's a completely different story than when you think it. Let's go back to the dream recounting. When you have had a dream and you recount it to somebody, have you noticed that you remember that dream now? It's true. So there's a different area of the brain that connects with speech than thinking, different motor mechanisms. That area connects. And then you get that exchange between the right and left hemispheres of the brain. And there's that little thing we call the corpus callosum, which allows a freer exchange between the right and left area of the brain. Women have a thicker corpus callosum. It's right in the center, it divides the two halves. So when we have an emotional memory, the emotions get married to the cognitive. Boom. And that's when those brain synapses start charging back and forth. So a lot of times when I am asking questions during the question period, it's a little bit of a minefield because I could just stay in that for the whole rest of the time. But the point is to be beneficial to everybody. And really at that moment that that person's telling that story, I'm really mostly benefiting them. Other than the fact that that can inspire another person to tell a story. And that's usually what happens when we have a story moment between songs. That's about 5 minutes long, just 5 minutes. Don't go past that because we got to get back in singing again. Okay. But during that 5 minutes, you have that opportunity to kind of mine these memories a little bit. Don't ask questions that are convoluted answers. A good example would be, "Oh, so you got married and danced to that song. It had to be you. So how many people were in the chapel? Was it a lot of people there? Or what was the name of the preacher?" No, 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 no. Don't ask them things where they might not have that ready to go. The following week, they might have that information for you. But don't ask them questions that require more than a yes or no response. Okay? That's part of the nature of most of the diseases that cause dementia. That's part of the baggage that comes along with dementia. You really just want yes or no answers. Let the person offer a little more if you want, but keep it down to about 5 minutes. I've never really had a negative experience with the story exchange, but I have noticed sometimes when we're singing a song, that can actually create a negative memory for some people once in a great while. And when that happens, I kind of look at the caregiver and I give them the sign, you know, keep your eye on this person. It's like they know the sign. It's like I look, I go, and I look again and I go, and then they get it. They get it. So get to know your caregivers. Let them know that you are having a little bit of a rest time between every 3 songs, and that your intention is to make their memories better by once in a while bringing up stuff like that. Celebrities can be a big stimulation for people. Talking about celebrities, Elvis. Elvis is huge. So if we sing I Can't Help Falling in Love with You, we get into it. The choir really gets into it. And then we might talk about Elvis for a minute. Were you an Elvis collector? Who here had Elvis albums? And then somebody is going to raise their hand and they're going to say, I had every Elvis album. And that's a very proud mantle to hold. Okay. So Elvis is great for bringing up memories and talking about being a teenager. Another great memory bringer-upper are movies. We talk about The Wizard of Oz, and then you might say, that was a wonderful movie, The Wizard of Oz. I'm trying to remember, it was Judy, and of course you know it's Judy Garland, but you want for somebody to say, Garland, right? You want for somebody to say that. So it's okay if nobody says Garland, but you really want to try and bring up that memory. So try and stimulate the crowd in a way that they don't know they're being stimulated. Que sera, sera, that's Doris Day. So you might say, Doris Day, wow, now that's somebody I don't think about too often. Doris Day, didn't she have a show? The Doris Day Show? You know. So some of you are really young that are taking this course, and so you're going to have to find out who these people are. So it's a good idea to go on to YouTube and bring up the original hits of the songs that I gave you the first week. Bring up those hits and begin to explore, who were these people? Who was Andy Williams? Who was Andy Williams? Andy Williams had a great show. He had a big moon behind him for Moon River. So you need to just take time and maybe read some books about early idols of the 1940s and 50s and 60s. All right, so I've given you a lot to think about here, but the question answering period is the most important. You will notice that the people who offer the most in terms of stories are likely to come back the next week, and they're a little bit sharper. You almost can't believe that in 1 week of stories, they could be sharper. But they are, because the whole week they've been thinking about that story they told. Who, what, when, where. Forget the why and how. Too much information.